Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 13th in my LSAT Insights series. Today, we'll be discussing the very recent news that I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard of, which is that starting next year, LG is going away. So LG is dead, and they are replacing it with another LR section. So let's get right into it. So you've probably heard the news, and if you haven't, you're hearing it from me. Back in 2019, the LSAC settled a lawsuit with two blind students who claimed that LG, as a section, disadvantaged blind test takers, which I believe to be actually true. The settlement, the agreement that the LSAC do, they committed to just replacing LG, that they would remove it, replace it with something else that wasn't as disadvantageous to blind students. And so for those of you, I don't know if I've told this story on the channel, but one of my very first private tutoring students was in fact a blind student who was like not just like legally blind in terms of losing the edge of their vision, literally like full on blind, right? And so this was back in the sort of like early 2010s era, and screen readers and sort of accessibility technology for computers wasn't quite as good as it is now. It was still, it wasn't like non-existent, but it wasn't, AI voice reading was not nearly as good, fast and smooth and human sounding as it is now. Even now it's not that great, but back then it was even worse. And so this student was just at a huge disadvantage for the entire exam, but at least the other verbal parts of it were doable. They just needed to wait for the program to get through reading things. And if they had to reread anything, it was a little bit of a hassle to direct the program to reread specific things. Again, the technology has advanced between then and now, but it was still a hassle. But LG definitely, it was tough. We had to try to set up a spreadsheet and then have the computer read out the relative positions of things on the spreadsheet, like cell A1 is X and cell B3 is Y, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It was barely doable, but even with a huge time accommodation, this student just simply could not do LG, and not because they didn't have the mental capacity to do it or the skill to do it. It was just the technology that allowed them to process a visually oriented section was just, it just wasn't there. And so, against that backdrop, it's not surprising to me that the LSAC decided to settle it out because they probably knew these facts just as well as I did. And so, this early, or late last week, or the middle of last week, really, on October 18th, so that's last Wednesday, the LSAC announced that starting on the August 2024 exam, LG will no longer appear. So whatever exam that comes just before that August 2024 exam is going to have LG on it. But starting with the August 2024 exam, LG is not going to be on the exam. And starting with that same exam, the exam will then begin to consist of two graded LR sections, one graded RC section, and as usual, one experimental section, and that section will be either LR or RC. So basically no LG of any kind, and that scored LG section will be replaced with a scored LR section. Pretty simple. Basically, getting rid of LG, sticking in another LR, and that's what's happening. So the interesting thing to me is that the LSAC further stated that they analyzed 218,000 and some change actual test sessions. So these are tests that people actually took, not individual testers, because the same people can take multiple exams, right? So, but they looked at 218,000 actual taken exams and found that if they removed LG from the score and added a second LR section to the score and made that the actual score, that resulted in no meaningful change to the overall score. The mean score went up from 150.82 to 150.83. So that's 100th of a point. So there's really no change, which is kind of interesting that I mean, you figured that that's part of the due diligence. They would have to do something like this, but it's nice that we have these numbers here. No meaningful change to the overall mean score in 200,000 exams. And if you want to hear it directly from them, this is the URL, lsac.org/blog, what to expect starting with August 2024 LSAT. Because I don't really am not really interested in making a clickable link, I may add one here if I'm allowed to. But yeah, basically an easier way to find it is just to go to lsac.org, click on blog. It's one of the top options across the top of the page, and this will be on the first page at this point because it's so recent. But here's the full link um, if you can actually do that. So here's the important part. Should you even care about this news? And my guess is probably. So my students, and if Reddit and the interwebs in general are to believe a lot of folks who are in your same position, you guys can fairly reliably -1 or -0 LG. But as a rule for me, it's generally more of a struggle to get LR to be that consistently good. There are people who are getting -1, -0 on LR, but it seems to be, in my experience, far fewer people do that as easily as they can do LG to -1, -0. If you work on LG enough, you're basically going to get to -1, -0, maybe -2, right? But you're essentially acing the thing. But acing LR seems to be something that most people have struggled doing. But that's not to say that nobody does it. Quite a few people have been helped by the loophole book that I've heard about, so much about. And I see a lot of people saying that, hey, that's what got them to -1, -0. It just doesn't seem to be nearly as widespread as LG in -0. So a good LG section has been the foundation of a 170 plus score for many years now. But the real question about why I should care is the LSAC did just provide data on that first slide that I had up a second ago about the median and the mean not changing. But that's really for me, the median slash mean test takers. People who are in the middle of the bell curve who are landing on 150, they aren't the ones who are getting -1 to -0 in LG in the first place. They're not the people who are in your score range looking to push up from the 160s into the 170s. That's not who they are. And so they were likely close to missing close to 10 per section. And that's you guys are not the same people. So these people are not going to be nearly as affected by the removal of LG as you guys, a lot of you who are very capable of getting LG to be -0. You're losing that now. You used to be able to lean on that to build a very strong score. Now you no longer have that crutch. That crutch did not really exist for these people who were talked about specifically in the data that the LSAC provided, which is again about the median score and the mean score. Ultimately, I agree with Seven Sage. Their whole take on it. They also had a blog post of their own at sevensage.com/slash the new LSAT. In that they believe, and I would agree with them, the number of people getting a given score is probably not going to change. But who gets that score is going to shuffle around a bit. So maybe the number of 170s is not going to change, but the people who get 170s are now going to be the people who used to struggle with LG and were much better at LR, and now they don't have LG dragging them down, and they get boosted by the strong performance in LR. Whereas people who used to be 170 eligible are now going to struggle because a lot of those people, like I said, relied on a strong LG performance to be the foundation of them getting up that high. And now that that's gone, they may not be naturally as good at LR, and so they might fall lower on the score scale as a result. So maybe you should care whatever's going on. What should you actually do? My recommendations are as follows. If you're just kind of dead set on taking an exam prior to August 2024, then change nothing. The exam that you're going to take, it still has LG on it. You still study it. It's not going to change. However, if you've been studying and you realize that you're better at LR than LG, then you might want to consider postponing to August 2024 as your schedule allows, and your schedule slash life plan recommendations, all the other things, and gap year or not, if those things allow for it. You should consider taking the 2024 exams simply because, or August 2024 and beyond, simply because that will play to your strengths. You no longer have to struggle with the terror that is LG if it's not working out for you, and you get to lean on LR if you're better at it. If you're better at LG than LR from a raw numbers perspective, then you've really got to commit to getting your best score before August 2024. Again, because like I said, if you've been relying on LG to serve as the foundation of a solid score, you're not going to have that anymore. So if you don't get the score that you want by like June of next year, and you're forced to take the August 2024 exam, it's only going to get worse because now you're going to have to lean on LR, which is weaker than LG for you, and it's going to be harder for you to get the same scores. If you're about the same at LG and LR, then you don't even need to ask. Like it doesn't really seem to matter which version of the exam you take. You're in the same position as those median slash mean test takers that we talked about on the sort of second slide, where it doesn't really matter. Your final score is going to be indifferent to this. So just to close out with some further speculations, I am pretty sure the difficulty and competition of the LR sections, it's going to look a lot like what you'll find in all the classic PTs that are based on the pre-online four-section LSATs. And so that's back in the day when it was a paper pencil exam, and there were you would take five multiple choice sections on test day, four of them would be graded, and one of them experimental. So back in the day, there were two LR sections that were graded. The LG section was graded, and RC was graded. That's how it used to work. And then there was a fifth experimental, which could have been any one of those three sections. I'm pretty sure that, so a lot of you who have taken those old PTs older PTs, even the more recent ones, have that same structure. You will have noticed that there are a lot of times where one of the LG sections seems a little bit weirder or harder than the others, but it's not because it's experimental. Both of those are real LR sections that were really graded. I think that's going to be the case. That it's going to look a lot like it's not going to be anything new. It's going to be stuff that we've seen before. Two LR sections. One of them is probably going to be slightly more challenging than the other, but usually they're kind of samey. That's what it's going to be. I don't think they're going to go and really change that. Yeah, I sincerely doubt that they will significantly alter LR immediately as a response to this October 18th change that we're talking about here. I don't think they're going to invent new questions just as a result of this. If there are any new questions to add, I think that's part of the natural evolution of LR because they have changed LR a little bit. They didn't used to ask principal versus application questions at all, and then they're asking them pretty much every exam now. And so there's a natural evolution to these sections, and I don't think any change that happens around August 2024 is going to be exactly as a response to the fact that LG is dead and RC is more important, or excuse me, LR is more important again. I think it's just going to be more of the same LR composition that we've always seen throughout the decades here. Really, though, for me as an instructor, that I think the instructional side of things is what's going to change the most because obviously you just don't have to teach LG anymore. But for those of you who've been following the content, for me, my biggest challenge is personally going to be no longer having LG to serve as a starting point. So my whole shtick is to take the appropriate indifference to detail that you guys naturally already do for LG. So in case any of you don't know, to catch you up, when I'm talking about indifference in LG, it's that you don't really care about what company X does or what company Y does, or the fact that the flour truck or the tortilla truck can't make it to office number 2 on Tuesday. Like that doesn't really matter to you. You don't really care any further about it. All you care about is literally, well, if the taco truck can't make it to office 2 on Wednesday, what does that mean? That's what you care about. You don't care about why the taco truck can't make it there, or you don't drill into it. The taco truck is a taco truck. It could be replaced with the letter T. It could be replaced with the number one, the letter A. It doesn't matter what it is. It's interchangeable. All you care about is the entities as like different chess pieces on the board. You don't care about the chess pieces themselves. You care about how you move them around on the board. So that I think is the appropriate level of indifference to detail on this exam at large, and LG helps you do that naturally. I then take that indifference and import it into RC. A lot of you guys just feel like RC, totally switch gears for RC, whereas I think you can benefit a lot from that indifference that I was talking about in LG. You don't have to care about this complex detail that the author of a passage has included. You don't have to care what it is. You only care why it's there logically and how it relates to the other complicated details in the passage. And so that I think is something that you naturally do on LG, and all I do at the beginning of RC is basically force you guys, those of you who are my one-on-one students, to import that same indifference from LG into RC, and the results are pretty solid for most people. And then, of course, after importing that indifference into RC, the positive effects of that trickle into LR as well. You begin to see things as you don't need to understand exactly precisely what everything is. So again, you don't care about what something is, you care about how it works, why it's there, what it's allowed to interact with, that sort of thing. Now, at this point in the future, starting with August 2024, I'm just going to have to hit RC really hard out of the gate and find more ways to express that appropriate level of indifference without the benefit of LG as just a natural example. So, I mean, I've been kind of been doing this for people who don't want to talk to me about LG anyway because they're already minus zeroing it. And we start with RC. I mean, so it's not. I'm not going to be completely flat-footed on this. I already know how to do it. I'm just going to have to lean harder into it. So, thanks for being here. If you have any further questions, of course, feel free to continue emailing me about this issue. Most likely, all I'm going to get at this point is just more emails about your specific cases, should you wait until August or not. But honestly, you're going to know that answer better than I will based on the criteria that I have. How good are you at LR versus how good you are at LG? If it's the same, don't worry. It's not going to change anything. If you're better at LG, take the exam before August. If you're better at LR, take the exam August or later next year. That's what it comes down to. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.